Record Show.
And co-host Marine Corps Map, coming to you on Monday and Tuesdays in Studio A, noon to 2 Eastern.
And Studio B on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern, with educational, instructional information, and situational updates, often with wonderful guests on the current landscape in the U.S. and overseas.
This is a go.
We are with you, side to side, and back to back.
Please join us on Monday through Wednesdays,
as well as other hosts and guests here on Revolution Radio.
We're not gonna take it anymore. That's right, we're not gonna take it anymore. We said we're not gonna take it anymore. That's right, we're not gonna take it anymore.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective. I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings, with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff and co-host Jannie as they carry stones, dig holes, and wield their shovels along the way. On Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is not a seated event. As they talk, run, stumble, carry, dig, drag, laugh, fight, sing and pray, dance and kick and scream, and oftentimes fall. Hey, is that a stone or a buffalo chick? Now, here are your hosts for the next 2 hours on carrying stones and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
Hey everybody, this is your host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff, and Jannie is out hopefully for the last weekend. She's finishing up her permaculture certification so she can move on to some cash projects. Go ahead and go to the Revolution Radio freedomslips.com website, and because we are listener supported, we need your support. So go ahead and click on the funding area and go ahead and support us with donations, or check out all the heirloom seeds we have. We have all kinds of amazing seeds, and I highly recommend heirloom seeds. I just got done planting a whole bunch of native and heirloom seeds in the garden bed. I was restoring for a good friend of mine. And so we're waiting for those little bad boys to sprout up, and then I'll post a video on my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project YouTube channel. All kinds of interesting videos I put up, and farming stuff, gardening stuff, blah, 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 shamanism stuff. Probably a collective mess. So anyway, today I'm alone. I was hoping to have a guest, but it was the last minute. I'm hoping he's going to come on in 2 weeks anyway. He's a super good friend of mine, and he was MK Ultra since he was a little boy, since 6 years old, but he's really interesting and fun to talk to, and he also walks the Red Road, the Native Way. And he is an amazing person. He's also a veteran, so we're hoping we're going to see him in a couple weeks. So the topic that I wanted to probably talk to today, woke up, just had lots of anxiety, had a really not so good day yesterday. So the gang stalkers have been off of me for about 3 years, and yesterday they decided to show up again. So I wanted to kind of talk about gang stalking a little bit for, people from my experience, and, maybe even stories of other people that I've read. But, before it used to be called being handled or having a handler. And all of it is kind of, like mind control technique. It all is to create trauma and drama. It's all active to split people's personalities, throw them off balance, throw them off base. When you're paranoid and stressed out and in drama, you really can't connect to, I don't even really like the word intuition. In the type of work that I've done on the shamanism path, like very old shamanism type work, we call it attention. You being able to hold your attention in the face of whatever else is going to be going on around you. And being able to hold your attention for hours and hours and hours and not being distracted with everything that's going on around you, especially what they would term as petty tyrants. Anyway, we might talk about some of the shamanism stuff at the second part of the show. I wanted to talk to people about basics in shamanism, the type of shamanism that I've been trained in, that has come from my own family lines, and what my focuses of attention are, and my focuses of intention, attention and intention. So I try to get away from some of those words like intuition, because usually it's just like a gut hit, and it's not really anything long term that you can actually hold on to and figure out what the story is. Okay, so being handled in the past, being handled by a person or a group of people. And so the last show I did about me being a star kid a couple weeks ago talked about my parents being handled early on. And by people. So my mom was handled by one of her first boyfriends when she was 18 years old. He married her in California. His family never showed up. He took her back to the East Coast. And then basically, my family never knew his family or heard from that family ever again. And my grandmother received a letter 6 months later in the mail that my mom had been put into a mental hospital and that the marriage had been annulled, and that basically my mother was in pretty bad shape. I mean, and back in those days, women were still considered property. So I think there's like Ploth, who was a very famous poet. She has a whole bunch of writings on her, mental hospital incarcerations due to her husband not being able to get what he wanted from her, maybe not enough sex, or she didn't clean the house, or she was going to wear pants, or whatever she was going to do. And there's a lot of writings I've read. There was a book called Women in Madness. I think it was written in like the 70s. And it was about a woman psychiatrist that was discussing, what had happened to women and the incarceration of women into mental hospitals and the things that would happen to them. They would be profusely raped. They were given, massive electroshock therapy. They were drugged. They were taped to tables indefinitely. Probably worse torture than you get if you're captured by the military in some regards. Experimental drugs used on you. So my mom was handled. She came from a bloodline and lineage of prophets and shamans and exorcists and herbalists, long lineage in our family on my mom's side. And then my real dad, who I didn't really get to be very part of my life, much of my life, he was also chased down and went into hiding for years and years and years because of, the government and NASA trying to kidnap him into the remote viewing programs and use him as a weapon. And, as I've aged and gotten older, now I'm like going to be 50 this year. You start to put like the puzzle together. I've met, I met a woman who works in the internal part of the Pentagon. That's like the very inside part, which even the people who work in the Pentagon don't know about. And she was talking about her teacher, who was a shaman, native, full-on shaman, and she was pulled into the government, by NASA years and years ago. She had an ability to actually explode people. So they used her as a weapon. And I get that a lot of people that are listening to this kind of stuff are going to be like, wow, this is like kind of a little bit too far out there. But this kind of stuff's been going on for a super, super long time. And it's just now that people are starting to generally wake up to what has been happening. Meanwhile, they've had mind control on you using TV and movies and a mortgage and credit cards and shopping and, all these lovely things. Medicine has been like a super, massive mind control. I think it's pretty interesting that, Trump signed that executive order a couple weeks ago, forcing doctors and insurance companies to basically accept that people can have experimental treatments if they want. So, what kind of things fall into experimental treatment? Maybe the use of, marijuana products for their epilepsy or their cancer. So, I'm not saying it's going to fix like the medical system, but at least it gives it a little bit of a legal precedence in the Admiralty law that forces the hand a little bit if people are smart enough when they're using the medical system to use, legal things like the executive order to force their doctor to, the doctor at this point won't be able to actually say, okay, I'm not going to see you anymore. That's what a lot of them do. If you don't want to take their, chemo or whatever else, they'll tell you, well, I'll just, cancel you as a patient, and then your insurance company will dump you. I can't tell you how many people that have ended up in my practice that have told me things like that. And early on in my practice, I would get, when you had those old type recorders, that were attached to your phone, I would get all kinds of harassment from doctors who their patients were coming to see me and they were getting off drugs and they were getting out of pain and their mind and their brain was starting to work and their head injury was finally, clearing after years and years. And they would leave me threatening messages, these doctors, like, we're going to come after you, we're going to hurt you, you're not going to be in business very much longer, we're going to, take you out, what you're doing is wrong, all kinds of stuff. I never once called a doctor and harassed them. So, it's just them trying to hold on to their monopoly of, mind control. There were a lot of functioning medical people and alternative medicine people long before the American Medical Association was formed. And then they decided that you would have to go through their colleges and get their education in order to, be insured. So then we have this insurance scam thing. Anyway, that's a whole other medical thing. So before, back in the day, people were handled. So most of my life, I would end up, I was raised by my father who, my stepfather who raised me since I was little. And he had been in like World War II. He was always a private, but he was one of their top snipers. Amazing guy. This guy, he was like a Hawkeye. So he was well aware of my family situation and our family abilities and just the, let's just say, handlers and creepy weirdos that will like infiltrate into our lives. And so he raised me kind of with this whole like military thinking, like what's going on around you. Don't believe things that other people are saying. If everybody was lining up to jump off a cliff, you need to think about like, are you going to follow them or not? Don't be a sheep. Have your own thinking. Use your abilities. And he was, pretty harsh on being married or getting pregnant. And he was really harsh on, me getting a college education and traveling and being my own person and having my own mind in this world, and really having like a work ethic, not giving up. So he taught me a lot of really amazing things that I think has helped me to survive over the years. The first time I ever realized I was being handled was I went through this really catatonic period in my life. I left home at 16. I worked multiple jobs. I went to night school. I was living on my own with roommates, and started to party quite a bit. And about 19, I hit like this. I was kind of an assistant manager of this men's clothing, because I've always been kind of an overachiever. This men's clothing store. And during that time period, I was doing quite a bit, massive amount of drugs. I was partying. It was pretty intense. And I had a situation where, I was walking to work, in my little suit and, my high heels, which was like a few blocks away, to do inventory and then open the store. And I blacked out. And I don't even know how long I had been blacked out, but I literally on the curb. And these elderly people found me out in front of their house, and they dragged me under the carport, and they're trying to talk to me. And then the ambulance came, all kinds of stuff. Meanwhile, basically, I hit the wall of my drug use. So after that, I had 3 roommates in a house. They were pretty heavy partiers. They were all band members and things like that. So, it was rocking pretty much every day. I mean, instead of having like normal things in your living room, we had like drum set, guitars, all kinds of stuff, and tons of drugs, would come in the door, just how it was kind of back then. And I ended up being catatonic after this event. Like I couldn't go to work. I couldn't communicate. I couldn't talk to anybody. And I literally sat on a couch for 7 days. I mean, like I was totally catatonic. Somebody called my grandmother, and my grandmother called and told me, maybe it's time to get some psychiatric help, and get myself like cleaned up. So I ended up finding a psychiatrist in the phone book that also had psychologists in the building. And I went for my appointment, and I was talking to the psychiatrist in his private room, and he was saying, well, we would like to put you on some drugs. See, back then they didn't have drug detox. Nowadays they have rehab and drug detox. And, let's put you on some drugs to kind of get you mentally stable. And I'm like, look, haven't had drugs for like 3 weeks. I don't think I really want to go back on any kind of drugs or, anything that is going to disable me. Like, I really feel like I need to start using my brain and getting my, self back together. And he would say, okay, can you just hold on 1 minute, please, and whatever. And he kept going out in the lobby. And then at one point I saw that the door was ajar, and I looked out, and there was like 2 guys that had shown up with these like white coats and stuff. And I just had the worst feeling, like run now. And I remember like my body just jumped up, and I went running out the door, and they looked at me, and, I just said, hey, just really not into this conversation, and I don't know what's going on, but I feel totally uncomfortable, and I'm out of here. And I just ran out the door on foot, and I ran probably, I don't know, quite a ways back to my house. And I think I was like around 19 when this was going on. Well, anyway, I get a call from the receptionist at this center saying that, if I could please come back in and talk to the psychiatrist again. And he realized like he didn't have, and meanwhile, now I know that that's against the law. Like that is a total, a psychiatrist, they cannot call you on the phone and harass you or try to get you to do something. That's totally against the law. You can make an appointment, go in, have a confidential conversation. And so I haven't actually talked about this, I don't think, publicly, so it's kind of intense. So what happened is that I decided to go back in, listen to what he had to say. He said, okay, well, we're not going to put you on drugs, but, we have this really great psychologist who's really great at dealing with, family issues. Apparently, maybe you have some family issues or whatever else, and help you to kind of, get yourself off drugs, blah, 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 blah. And he may be more useful to you. And could we schedule you an appointment? I was like, great. So it was about 2 weeks. I got in to see this guy. His name was Dave. His first name was Dave. And it was awesome. We had a really great time and really learned, some really valuable information from him, and how to handle the saboteur that lived in me that was sabotaging myself, and kind of where it came from. And, it was this fear projection that I was projecting on myself because of my family and growing up so abnormally compared to everybody else. And also having all these gifts that, I had to have programs in order for when those gifts or things like that started to come up and I started to achieve things and started to do really well, I would have this saboteur that would come up and kind of level me so that I would be like average, average Joe, and drinking and drugs and alcohol and partying and all those saboteurs, saboteurs that we play in. So I went to him, I don't know, like maybe a year. And then right before the year was up, he said, he was interested in exploring, some of the abilities I had. And back then, a lot of the abilities I had were pretty negative because I was kind of in a negative state. So say, for example, somebody was really ticking me off. All I had to do was walk over and brush them, and I could actually pull all the energy out of their body, and they would just flump over wherever they were at for hours until their energy systems, could reboot. And I could do things like move doors. I really like to try to get doors to slam, without touching them. So there were just a lot of other things that I did. I really tried hard not to control other people and allow other people to be who they were. But sometimes when you have abilities, it's really frustrating, but I never harmed anybody in any of it when I was in a really negative place. And I knew things about people, I could hear their thoughts. I could know what they were going to do next. I could tell what kind of, behavior they were in. I knew what they were hiding. I knew like all these things about people. So it was very difficult for me to actually have a normal life, go into a grocery store when you're picking up all kinds of information that's disgusting. People raping people, or somebody in the grocery store who just beat their girlfriend, and were proud of it. That these things were in their energy field or going through their minds. I mean, this planet is a really sick planet. I mean, really, really sick. There's a lot of really, really sick people here. Okay, so Anyway, I started showing Dave, the psychologist, some of the things that I could do, and he was really blown away. And then it came to the day where, we were done with the sessions, and, I asked him, I said, do you think that I'm like schizophrenic, or, like there's something wrong with me, like clinically wrong? And he said, no, there's nothing wrong with you. He said, it's just you're, kind of like innocent naivety trying to deal with this world, and it's just not a very friendly world, and you just got to work on more protections, work on using the skills that we've given you so that when you're going into a program that you've created, and not go into that program, so that you can stay kind of in control and you can be awake and you can have attention and all this other stuff. So it was about a month later, I get a call from him, and he says, hey, I have a really good friend who works for NASA. This is where NASA started to really start coming up in my life. And he works for NASA, and he's going to be in town with his wife, and they're going to be having dinner at my house, and it'll be me and my wife, and we'd like to invite you. And then if you want to bring, a friend with you or a date, you can go ahead and do that. But he's really interested in talking to you, like about your abilities. And I thought, hey, this could be, because here I am, like 19. I'm totally naive to the fact that, there's handlers out there. And I didn't really know at that time what had happened to my mom in being handled. And I didn't have a whole lot of, it'd been a year previously since the last time I had seen my real dad. And that was pretty crazy. We went to dinner and then he completely disappeared. He was supposed to give me these books from like the 1600s. They were books from some of the, not, like mystery schools and stuff like that. They were really old books. And that, and then the last thing he left me with is like, you've gotten the double whammy. Like you're beyond gifted and you're just going to have to like watch yourself, and then, that was the final disappearance until I had to go collect his dead body in October, 2016, getting a call from the coroner's office, which I believe I was being handled. I think the whole thing was kind of a weird setup. And there's a lot of reasons why. But the reason I'm telling people this kind of stuff is so those people that are out there who are dealing with gang stalking and who are dealing with being handled and how the words change, like let's just talk about in medicine. They constantly use different words to confuse you. So for example, if you went to the doctor and they looked at your spine and you had a bulging disc or whatever, they would call it that. They would say, oh, you've got a herniated disc or a bulging disc. If you went to a chiropractor, they would call it a subluxation. If you went to a massage therapist, they would call it a compression, right? But it's the same thing across the board. There's no difference. So, being handled or having handlers is kind of morphed into a modern day thing, which is gang stalking. And they actually utilize it for more people and masses of people. So anybody out there that thinks that they may be crazy, you're not crazy. This stuff is like really, really happening. And some of it can be super, super, super intense, and make you like go into total fear. And it's really hard to be able to trust anybody. I've never been married, never had kids. I didn't want to give the powers that be any kind of opportunity to harm anybody else in my life or use somebody else in my life as a weapon. And they have before. One of my best friends, she was murdered. And my other business partner and other best friend was murdered. And they were murdered. They didn't know each other. And they were murdered within a year of each other. So they do, they have used whatever they can against me in the past. So I'm just really careful about, the people that are in my life. And it's only been in the last 4 years that I've been really starting to talk about a lot of my experiences, about who I am. And so it's an intense conversation for me. I think because you have to go against the grain and you have to be secure in yourself and you have to say, this is happening to me. And I know it's happening to me because I'm fully awake. I'm holding my attention and I'm not being distracted. Squirrel. There's none of that. I'm fully awake and I see no matter they could throw a ball at me and I wouldn't pay attention to the ball, I would still be focused in on what they're doing. Because, of my shamanism practices, I don't get distracted about any of it because one little distraction can just end up being like a total nightmare, not only for yourself, but those around you. Okay, so, and sorry, I'm still fighting this stupid chemtrail cold. Okay, so the psychologist calls me after we're done, having sessions, and I've been released from his care, which now I know is totally against the law. This would be a total reason for his license to be pulled and him never to be able to practice as a psychologist ever again. But, I didn't know that when I was young. So I was excited. I was like somebody, from NASA, maybe they know about people like me always kind of felt like I was one of those mutants, like on the, I forget the series, like some kind of weird mutant. So always wanted to know more about myself, or, what my abilities could be. It never was not warned against NASA. So anyway, I was really excited. So I called a friend of mine, and I said, hey, you want to go with me kind of on a date? And he said, yeah, like, what are we doing? And I said, hey, we're going to go to my psychologist's house. Him and his wife have invited us for dinner, and they have a friend from NASA and his wife are going to be there. And the guy from NASA wants to test me a little bit and wants to find out more about me and blah, blah, blah. And it's just going to be kind of a casual dinner party. And my friend goes, casual? That does not in any way, shape, or form sound casual to me. He goes, I refuse to go. And he said, you know what, you need to refuse to go. He said, this is a total setup. He goes, what happens if, they see something in you and then you end up kidnapped? You end up removed, and they use you for something that you don't want to be used for. And, that was the first time that ever dawned on me, that could happen. So I ended up calling the psychologist and I said, yeah, I can't really find anyone who is willing to go with me, and I don't really feel comfortable going by myself. And so I'm not going to be able to, make your dinner party. Anyway, 4 months later in the newspaper, the building that all this took place in, it was at 7777 Forest Street in Reno, burns to the ground, gone. Like, everything's gone. The whole place is gone. All the, nobody was there when it burned down to the ground, but all the files and everything else burned up, with it. And then I found out 2 years later that Dave had supposedly committed suicide 3 months before the building burned down, and he was hanged and his wrists were cut. And everybody reported in the psychology field, I found this out from another psychologist, that, he was never the type of person that would ever commit suicide or take his own life. He was super happy, well balanced and all kinds of stuff. And it's pretty hard to, slash your wrists. It's pretty hard to, slash your wrists and hang yourself all at the same time. Okay, so after that, I started really, and it was right at the time, it would have probably been about a month after I refused to attend the dinner party. So after that, I started getting more and more handlers. I just didn't know it at the time. I didn't really know how to view them. And there were always people that seemed like they knew a lot. They were super intelligent. And I'm not saying that I didn't learn a lot from these people. I learned a lot about law. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about, putting on a good facade, putting on your wig and makeup and going out in the world and, being really good at pretending to be somebody else and keeping, yourself and your personal life, in a closet or behind closed doors. So in my life, and I could always tell, because it always, with a handler, it always becomes aggressive towards the end. When you start to kind of question, maybe not your friendship with them, but you're like, yeah, that doesn't really work for me anymore. I'm not really interested in doing that. Then the aggressive behavior starts to come at you. And then you can start to see kind of the mind control, kind of coming out. And I remember being mind controlled by somebody who was super good, really, really good, and a billionaire businessman. We became really good friends, and he would use, towards the end of our friendship, he would just use the most bizarre things to distract me and throw me off my attention. So he would say things like, well, this is not how, how would Jesus do it, and start to throw this whole religion component in. And I don't really believe in Jesus. So I don't believe, in a lot of that kind of stuff, especially dealing with the Bible. It's a lot of the stuff that's in what I call the everything world, which is what we live in. The everything it's a lot of it's just made, and a lot of it is propaganda, and a lot of these things we our attention is distracted, and we're easily, put our intention into it, and then it gives it life, it creates more energy. So the more that they're handling us, they're actually being able to use and direct our energies towards things. Well, now you've got more and more people who are harder to control. So now they've moved out into gang stalking. And I watched this video, 2 videos on this whole gang stalking thing when I realized like 6 years ago that it was happening to me. And because I was trying to really figure it out. And I forget what the girl's name is, but she was talking about her story, which was a really shocking story. And she had kind of become an activist, like in her town, and the things that they were covering up. There's a lot of, environmental toxicity of stuff that was going on in her town, and they were covering it up. And she was just an average person, and she found out about it. And she was, starting the fight and trying to get the word out and all kinds of stuff. And at one point, she said that she was at Starbucks in her town getting a coffee, and it was full. And most of these people knew her, and she said that this lady that she'd never seen before, nor had anybody in the town ever seen this lady, came in the door and started telling her, to her face, that she had like bashed in her car in the parking lot, that she, hit and run her car, and that how could she do that? Meanwhile, she had this phone, her cell phone on, and she was trying to get it into the face of the woman who was testifying on this video. And she's like, look, I didn't hit your car. I don't even know who you are. And the woman is like, I'm calling, the police right now. And the woman who's testifying said she was so shocked because literally as soon as she said that, the sheriff pulled into these were sheriffs that didn't work for her county, pull into the Starbucks. They get out of the car, they come in, and they actually handcuff her. And the woman's like yelling, I want a citizen's arrest because she, bashed my car in the parking lot and then took off, and I found her in here and all this other stuff. And they drag her out into the car, and she goes missing. She went missing for 3 weeks. Nobody, even her family, couldn't figure out where she's at. Well, they tucked her away in the mental health, area that only, doctors can go in, that they use experimental drugs, electroshock therapy. And she said she was in there for 3 weeks, and they were drugging her, and they were giving her all kinds of experimental stuff, and they were like doing mind control on her. And she said all kinds of crazy stuff, and they wouldn't let her near a phone. They wouldn't let her out of her little cell room. They kept telling her that she was like a danger to herself and all kinds of stuff. Well, her family finally found out. They went to their sheriff in their town, and then that sheriff started to, track her down, and they actually had to get like a warrant from the court for the sheriff's department to go in and walk through the whole mental health system that they had, so that he could see through every door and every window to identify this woman who's on this video testifying who'd been kidnapped, because, she was becoming outspoken. So one of the things that she said was, that came out later, was that they can use cell phones or iPhones. These gang stalker people work for government. They work for the government powers that be. And how they get around paying them is that they pay them in cards, an AT&T card, a, phone card, a, Walmart card. So instead of giving them a trackable, amount of money or cash in a briefcase or something that could be, trackable, they actually give them cards to go ahead and do the dirty work for them. And usually these people that are doing the gang stalking now, or like the ones who will gang stalk you in public, are usually like scumbags. Hate to say that word, but are like scumbags. I mean, they're usually people who have been through the drug system, and when they're sober, because they don't like to use them, if they're going to be on drugs, but if they see that they're going to be sober, and obviously they need money, And they're used to being, excuse me, they're used to being in gang type stuff and imposing, getting into people's spaces, being confrontational, catching people off guard. They're used to this kind of behavior. So it's not hard for the government to teach them what they already know and their natural behavior is going to be. So anyway, she's testifying in this video, and she said that, so they finally get her out, and then she starts to find out, like, there's people that kind of in the underground, we'll call it the underground networks, start contacting her, and giving her bits and pieces of information. Like, for example, they have, the government has these apps that you can put onto like iPhones that can track the brainwave pattern of a person. So each person has a unique brainwave pattern, right? It's a lot of your brainwave patterning has to do with what's happened to you in your life, and what kind of brainwaves that you have a tendency to run. You also, like, if you've been in chronic pain for a long time or disease, you're probably running a beta, with something else, maybe a combination. So your brainwaves are totally unique to you, your brainwave signals. So these iPhones can actually pick up. That's why this woman was crazy, and she's waving her phone at her, kind of up in close proximity to her at the Starbucks, because she was picking up her brainwave signature. Once they do that, the woman that was on the video, she said, then they can shoot from any cell phone tower in the area through your computer, through Wi-Fi, through your phone, a specific signal that is intended for you because of your brainwave patterning. And then they can actually give you a heart attack or a stroke. You think about, like, how many people, like, you read about all the time, died of heart attack, died of a stroke, died of a heart attack, died of a stroke, died of a heart attack, died of a stroke. So she said that once they get your brainwave pattern that's, yours, they can send signals that are identical to harm you, or do things to you, or catch you off base, or short circuit your brain, or increase your blood pressure really high. And then this is what, a lot of people now are talking about as weapons, electronic weapons that are being used against people who are trying to tell the truth, who are trying to be out in the system to explain to people and educate people about what's going on. So I saw a friend of mine one day get hit so hard with an electronic transmission. This person works, he's written books, and I can't really talk about, the arena that he's in, but I literally watched him in the morning walk into the kitchen, in over 20 minutes, do specific things, said the same thing, said, a few things, and then walked out of the kitchen 20 minutes later. Like an hour later, walked back into the kitchen and did the same exact things and said the exact, identical, and walked out of the kitchen. And he didn't know, he had no idea that he had done all that stuff twice. And so at first I thought, okay, it's a glitch. It's got to be a glitch in the system, It's got to be some kind of glitch. It's like past, present, and future. There's a glitch going on, kind of a thing. Maybe a new, government app into the 3D paradigm, or, who the heck knows. And then I realized that he was doing some work for this court, kind of as a formal testifier, in behalf of, trying to, let's say, get rid of like Monsanto's and things like that. Using a lot of the scientific research that he had done already, and that he, kind of had wrote about. So, that was electronic warfare working on him, almost turning him into like an android. And flipping his switch in a way that he didn't really know what was going on, and ended up doing the same exact 20 minutes of activities in the kitchen twice. I mean, exact. And you know what? I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it. So nowadays, so they have these handlers that get up close, try to get, their phones close to you so that they can read your brainwave pattern. And this is why I don't go out in public really a lot. I really try to stay out of the public as much as possible. I mean, I'm sure that they've probably got some kind of brainwave patterning, but I've had a lot of shifts, so my brainwave patterning keeps changing all the time. So they might have to come up with some new software in order to manage that. So the second video that I watched on YouTube was of a guy who, and it's since been removed, but who was a gang stalker. And he talked exactly about how it goes down. And he said that, he was a gangster and he was, a major street drug dealer, kind of at the top of the food chain. And he got busted and he went to jail for 10 years. And during that period, he was being handled by government agencies, and they were waiting to see if he was going to stay sober. And then, as soon as he was getting released, they helped to get his release because they said, hey, are you interested in working for us? Kind of like undercover agent kind of thing, people that, were monitoring and watching. And he's like, yeah, hell yeah. Not only am I going to get released, but now I'm going to get a job. And he said that that's how they paid him, was in these cards, and he would get, like $2,000 worth of merchandise or being able to pay bills, for a simple gang stalking. And he said that basically, you'd have your iPhone, you would get a call immediately. Like once they picked up where the person was with their GPS, if it was in your area, and you could get there, within 15, 20 minutes to see if the person's still there. Like, for example, if they went into the grocery store, then you can, get them in the parking lot or whatever else and do that. And meanwhile, you're texting, your handler or your agent that you're dealing with, text them all the information about what's going on, what it looks like, where they're at, what kind of, state they are. Meanwhile, you're trying to get close enough to them to collect, information about their energy field and how their brain works and, their brainwave patterning. And then all that information goes to your handler and to the government, like right through your phone. So the app, they can pull that information right out. And then it goes there. And he said, he didn't care. I mean, he'd rather be doing this and making money. And he said he got to a point where he didn't really want to do it anymore. And so he was creating a video to explain to people what they were doing and how they were doing it. And they could literally send a signal right then and there. So say the person didn't have a cell phone or anything else, the iPhone of the gang stalker would pick up the data if they were close enough to the person, and they could send a electronic GPS, current right there from cell phone towers. And now 5G is going to be way more accurate. And 5G now is going to be able to move faster than your thoughts. So it's actually going to be able to go into your brain and actually control your mind with thoughts and behavior. And you're not going to need all this other stuff. You're not going to need, cell phone towers or iPhones or anything else to be able to do this. It'll just be on one current, and they're everywhere. Like I go around Reno and there's more and more of these 5G, standing structures that are going up all over the place, and you get close to them and they make you sick. I have a video on my YouTube channel of a store that has two of them out front. And it's like I was standing across the street and I was getting nauseous and I was getting vertigo. And I can't even imagine what it would be like for a person to have to go and spend 8 hours in that place working, knowing that their DNA and everything is going to be, and their minds are going to be completely fractured. And they're going to just be dying because it's going to make them so sick. It's microwave radiation. It's like, being in a microwave oven with no doors and being cooked to death. So now it's going to start heating up. So one of the things that I saw when I was about 12 years old, I remember being shown the sky. And, back then I didn't know for sure if it was on this planet, if I'd already seen it on another planet that I've been to, if I had, if it's going to be in the future of this planet here, or what it's going to be. But now I totally understand what they were trying to show me, was that they would have like a leader, say the president, and they could project it onto the sky. So everywhere, no matter where you were at in the United States or the world, you would see the world leader up there talking to the citizens on the sky. And so now I realize, like, all this aluminum and all this other stuff makes the sky a TV screen. And then all you need is, the proper conductors to project an image onto the sky, which is now the new TV screen, and you can't get away from it. You can't turn the TV off. You can't do. And so they can project anything that they want onto it, and it bounces off. So it's easy to control the mind of the masses, not to mention all the aluminum, everything in it. That, in America, 1 in 7 people, adults, have Alzheimer's. There are people dying of full-blown Alzheimer's at 48. It's in the air, it's the chemtrails, it's all that aluminum and, the mercury and the aluminum in the vaccines, total brain damage. But that's what I saw, when I was growing up. Now I realize, like, that was like something that they were trying to implement in the future, and that I probably would see it during the course of my life. And it's crazy. It's like, it's total madness. This planet is total madness. Okay, so I want to talk about what happened yesterday. I might have a few minutes, so it might have to go into the next hour a little bit. Before yesterday's event of gain stalking, the second big one, which I'll talk about, I went to a hiking area. And in Nevada, we don't have a lot of trees everywhere. So you can see the whole sky and you can see all the mountains. And there's not really a whole lot unless you're in the city and there's, casinos and stuff. There's really nothing blocking your view. So I was on this hiking trail with my dog. And I noticed this guy when we parked at the trailhead. And he looked totally misplaced. He didn't look like he belonged on a trail. He wasn't dressed to be on a trail. He was on his phone texting and looking over at me the whole time when we were parking. So, I was really cautious, but I was thinking, it's a trailhead. I didn't stop to think that maybe they'd been waiting for me, because I had been going to that trailhead and I had been taking my tablet, which has, Wi-Fi and has GPS tracking on it or whatever else. And so, when I get there, I turn it off, I leave it in the car, and then I go on the hike. And so I'd been going there, 3 times a week. So of course they would have a gang stalker there, waiting for me. But, sometimes it takes a while for this kind of stuff to sink into what's going on, because you just want to trust that everything's going to be okay. And the thing is that you can't trust that everything's going to be okay, because it's not. You have to really pay attention to everything that's going on around you 24/7. And so this guy's like all weird, he's looking at me, he's texting, and I decide, okay, well, I'm going to go anyway. So we get down to the bottom of the trail, and then we've got to kind of turn, and then we're going to go back up. And the next thing I know, there's a total black helicopter right over me. And it's like totally, back then I had serious issues about black helicopters. They made me nervous. I hate helicopters because everywhere I've lived, there's always been tons of helicopters, and people that have come to visit me, they're like, dude, do you attract helicopters? Like, do you? I said, I know. It's like I just started to have panic attacks as soon as I hear like the helicopter's coming, because they're just going to like circle wherever I'm at 5 or 6 times. Doesn't matter if it's a sheriff, doesn't matter if it's Reno Police Department, doesn't matter if it's a black helicopter, doesn't matter. It's like constant. So, I see this black helicopter, and because it's black, shiny, the windows are blackened out. You can't really see anything. It's flying pretty low. It's a small helicopter. I think I better get my ass back to the car. You know, this may be one of those moments where, you know, I get nabbed and I am not going to make it back to my car. So I'm like cooking it, you know, this trail, and I'm running. And then I noticed by the time I get up to the top, like this helicopter just like vanished into thin air. So I get in my car. Right as I'm getting in my car, I shut the door, lock the doors. I look out the window. Right past the trailhead on the main road, this black SUV, like brand new black, solid black tinted windows, comes jamming by. And I'm like, all right, I'm on your butt. You know, I know that you're, you know, I'm not naive. I'm not losing my attention. I'm not distracted. I know exactly what's going on here. So I jump in my car and I start trailing this car, and then they speed up and the road gets super turny. And so by the time I get down to the bottom where it connects into a major roadway, that car's gone. There's no possible way. There's no other roads or anything that would have gone off of this curvy street that they could have gone into. And then that's when it kind of dawned on me. You know, like people talk a lot about men in black or whatever else, or who knows if it's like extraterrestrials. Okay, we'll be back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea. I'm coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey there, you're back live with Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, and today Jannie is out, hopefully after she finishes up her permaculture certification, that she will be back with us every Saturday full-time. Revolution Radio is listener supported, so Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, go and fund us. Click the funding area and see different ways that you may be able to fund us and also get yourself some good stuff like heirloom seeds. If you want to help Jannie and I with a lot of our projects other than Revolution Radio that we're working on, trying to educate the public and help people, and a lot of the work her and I do, we don't get paid for, and like most people know, I live in my van so that I can continue doing the work that I need to do. And because, we're trying to change the paradigm. So that takes a lot of educating and grassroots projects. But if you'd like to help us out, that would be great. She needs food sometimes for the little farm animals that she rescues. And she's, has a very limited, amount of money that she lives off of. So you can do that at PayPal. And you can use consciousnessofeconomics at gmail.com and donate to us. That would be great. I'd make sure that Jannie got her share. The other thing, too, is that you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project YouTube channel. I've got stuff on there about gardening and farming and shamanism and all kinds of paranormal stuff and extraterrestrial stuff. And if you want to reach me by email or contact me, you tell me I'm a nut or I'm crazy or, hey, like your show or you like what you're doing. You can reach me at consciousnessofeconomics at gmail.com. And I will try to return your message as soon as possible. And also I do a lot of shamanism work. I can do it long distance or I can do it in person. I do land and houses and animals, and I deal with people. Having a background in, I don't know what people want to call it, the paranormal or supernatural or whatever else. But anyway, you can contact me if you want an appointment, and I do shamanism consulting for business, for people, corporation. And then I can go out and do the remedies as well, or send the remedies by mail. So if anybody's interested in any of that, that would be great to book some appointments and help support me in the work that I'm doing. Okay, so I wanted to get back to this, and this other thing too is I know that the shows, that we're doing here, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, are kind of like all over the map. But when I have to do a show and I don't have a guest, I have to talk about things that I think that are important. When we have Jannie on, we'll probably, more and more, we'll talk about more controversial things. We have a lot of amazing, interesting guests, and then we're going to have some return guests. And so it's just going to be kind of educational all over the map. And that's just probably how it's going to be. But, the basis is the carrying stones and digging holes, which is, chopping wood and carrying water, because those things have to be done no matter what. We're not going to be able to get away from those basics of life while we're trying to explore and understand and navigate, some of the stranger aspects of this world in our life that we're bumping into. Okay, so on the last part, we were talking about the second to the last big gang stalking that happened to me, and there was a black helicopter that came in and left all of a sudden, and then this SUV coming in and then disappearing. And so what I started to understand as I started to see this phenomenon more and more is like, it is like the Truman Show here, because they can actually literally copy paste anything they want into this reality. So that's what they're doing. They're copy pasting these things into this reality, and then they copy paste them or whatever out of this reality. So now I spend more time watching the skies, and especially if I see black helicopters or black vehicles or, you know, Men in Blacky kind of stuff, you know, to try to understand exactly how they're copy pasting it in and out. And if there's different parts in the sky that are easier for them to do these things too. But they're always doing them to harass people. They're always doing it, you know, I think as part of their programming, and maybe to get in close proximity of you to maybe pick up on, you know, using, you know, software that we don't know about, to figure out what's going on in your energy field. You know, if you have illnesses, what your brainwave patterning is, what happens to your brainwave patterning if they circle you and harass you, you know, and different kinds of things just to see where you're at. So I think they're also trying to pick up information about you and where you're at. And also, you know, I'm pretty darn sure a friend of mine's son wrote a paper in college. He's like this computer expert, and the paper was basically on computer viruses, that people could get viruses that came from the computer, right? So they would be electronic viruses, just because of the AI and how all the systems work. That the AI, you know, is kind of a virus, and it can actually give people like nanoparticle type viruses or activate them in them. So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me at all is like when they're doing a drive-by over you, if they're sending, you know, electronic viruses to attack different parts of your body, like your immune system, your brain, your organs, and whatever else. I mean, these thoughts have occurred to me. Okay. So I want to talk about what happened yesterday, because it's been a long time. It's been like 6 years since I've had gang stalking. Because I kind of live out of town in a secured place, kind of in my van. When I go in town, I usually stay in town kind of all day because, you know, I can't really afford to waste gas. So if I have paid clients that I'm working on or whatever else, I have to kind of wait it out. So some grocery store parking lots are awesome because, you know, they'll have Wi-Fi, and you can sit in your car under a shaded tree. And like, you know, I have a little bed in my van. I could take a nap, work on my computer, you know, whatever else that I need to do. And if I need to, I can go in and get a snack or whatever else. So yesterday I was in an area of Reno that's a high-end area of Reno. And I had taken a nap, and I woke up and I had the front windows open of my car, my van, and my dog was up front sleeping. And I just got up, and I was sitting in the passenger seat with my back towards the window, and I was looking at my tablet just to see if I have any calls or anything, people that I need to communicate with. And I hear this stuff going on behind me in this car. And I literally look, and this car is like the most beat up, like rundown car. I mean, that was the first thing I noticed about the car. And then I look at the person in the car, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, what the hell is this guy doing up in this part of town and in this parking lot, just, you know, happening to sit there? And so then he started to notice that I was like noticing him. So then he starts to get kind of weird. And then he grabs his phone, and it's like a really expensive iPhone. Like, you know, not just like your typical, like, sign this contract for 2 years and you get this, you know, cell phone. And so he starts to kind of like start texting and all kinds of stuff. He's trying not to look at me. He's kind of looking at me at the corner of my eye. And I'm thinking, you know what? Gang stalker. You know, like, I haven't seen this kind of thing for a really long time. Gang stalker. So I just sit there with my back towards the open window. And then I hear, shh. And I literally turn around to look and see, you know, where this air noise is coming from. And he has some kind of cylinder in his hand, really kind of spraying it so that the nozzle is spraying stuff out the window and the wind is kind of blowing it towards my van. And I noticed that I couldn't make out a smell of what it was, and I freaked out, that part of me that, pulls me together and gets me into the driver's seat, starts the van, and I take off. And I literally go to the other side of the parking lot. I get out of my car and I walk over. And then this other guy comes up to the car, and all I could hear was, I couldn't do something, blah, 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 blah. Couldn't get it all done or whatever else. And it was just kind of weird. And this other guy that came up to the car was like, total druggy, gangster kind of looking guy, that you would see like, selling crack on the corner, in like the worst area of Los Angeles, the way he was dressed, how he was dressed, the kind of clothing he was wearing, super thin and Skeletor looking, just the whole thing. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is totally crazy. Like, what the heck were they trying to spray on me? What was that? Or, what the hell is going on? So I ended up parking on the other side of the parking lot. I'm in the shade, and, I'm not a faint of heart. In the past when there was gang stalking, I would have totally ran away. But nowadays I try to see if I can collect more information, maybe even become confrontational, whatever is, instead of running away, because I don't want to show them that I'm scared. I don't want to also put myself in a place of danger, but I also don't want to show them that I'm scared. So anyway, the one guy who was with him that wasn't in the car during what was going on, but came to the car after I left, he starts walking around the parking lot, and then he sees my van. And so I repark it in a way that I can actually watch what he's doing. And he's literally kind of going to each storefront while he's looking over at me and opening the door and like pretending to go in, but then ducking down and then going over to say the trash can. And then he pops up again and then tries, is trying to, outsmart me or whatever else. And I just stood there and I just totally watched the whole thing go down. Eventually, I got my van and I went and worked, on my client, crunched him out. And, but, these are the kind of things that are going on. And I wonder how many people are like on their cell phones. I mean, well, they call them the pink dot people, right? What was that sheriff that came out in 2008 and he talked about what the government was doing, that the government was putting a red spot on either your mailbox, a blue spot or a pink spot. And the red spot people would be pulled out of their houses and shot directly on their driveways because they would be the conspirator people. And so when the militaries were coming in, they were going to use non-English speaking militaries from other countries so that people couldn't talk their way out of whatever. And then the blue dot people would be confiscated and put into buses that would be coming behind, and they would be taken to like concentration camps or FEMA camps to be reprogrammed, to be, see if they could be remanipulated and mind controlled back into the system. And that the pink dot people would be the people who have no clue about anything going on whatsoever, and that they would be left alone and they would be given some kind of story like, oh, well, did you know your neighbors were terrorists and, they were plotting, a bombing. So, that's why there's blood on the driveway, because we had to drag them out and, take them out. So, the pink dot people, don't really have anything to worry about because they are living in such an oblivion in the reality of paying their mortgage and, going to this job and thinking that they have control over their life and paying their taxes and doing all these things. So, they're not on the gang stalker list. But people like me, who I consider a red dot person, always on the list, always. And, think about this. Think about people like me. You are trying to live a normal life, like go work on people, have a moment of relaxation or calm, have peace in your life. And it's like literally your life is like a battle zone with the things that are coming in at you constantly from the outside world. I sometimes think, I can't believe that I'm, number one, sane. Number two, I can't believe that I still can operate out in the public and the system, and not totally paranoid and so mentally disabled that I can just hide in a closet. And, I'm growing and I'm thriving, and the thing is where I've gotten to with a lot of this is that, if I die, I die. That's what it is. And there's nothing I, can really do about it. And if I'm going to be threatened or I'm going to be harassed or, people are going to try to program me or spray me with viruses or whatever else, all I can do is hold my attention and stay totally awake and pay attention to everything that's going on. And that's all that you can do. You can't slip up. And in shamanism, so we'll kind of segue into shamanism. In shamanism and the type of shamanism that I've studied and that my family line comes from and all this other stuff, the main key component is sobriety, because you cannot deal with your reality and hold your attention and be totally conscious and coherent 24/7, including when you're sleeping, if you don't have a life of sobriety. So, okay, let's talk about shamanism, because I think shamanism plays a really key role in, for me, how to deal with gang stalking. So in the type of shamanism, well, I have Southwestern lineage or, South American lineage. I'm not born in that lineage. I'm born in the Russian line. So there's several types of shamanism that I worked with, but a lot of them are old. And there's a lot of other things that I'm taught through, let's just call it the dreaming world, right? So most people go to sleep and they have dreams. A lot of times I go work with other people during that time frame, or I go to different places where some of these shamans have created their own place. They left the system in their bodies, say 1,000 years ago, and moved into another system. Some of them did them in groups, some of them did them by themselves, and we have a couple of mentions of these. Let's talk about the Tibetan. Let me write a couple things down. Okay, so one of my favorite characters was when I was in high school, and Lynn Andrews wrote her 3 books, and there's a mention of a native person, indigenous person named Twin Dreams, who had figured out 2,000 years previously how to move in the time continuums, right? In and out of this world into other worlds, right? And being able to pop out in and out of this reality whenever she wanted to. And it was claimed that she was 2,000 years old. She still had her physical body. She hadn't aged from the point that she started being able to go through these timelines. And so that right there tells you that's one person and that's one culture that could do it, right? Then you have a lot of the work in the Carlo Castaneda books, where they talk about at the end of the 80s work, where they leave as a group to go into creating. So they bypass this world into a crack, into, we call it another dimension or place or space or world, and then together as a group built the world that they wanted to live in together. I remember Carlo Castaneda saying that Don Juan really hated this world. It was a terrible world. And so then you have the Mayans and the Aztec type civilizations, or civilizations that, vanished off the planet. I took a workshop with a whole bunch of other amazing people who do a lot of this kind of work. And we had somebody that came from those old lineages and explained to us that during those time, say the Aztecs, the medicine person, gets a dream or an activation about, okay, hey, this is going to go down. The Spanish are going to come and they're going to liquidate us and, they're going to murder us. And so what we need to do is we need to project our whole civilization into another world, another reality. So they were talking about how these people would have practiced, sometimes maybe 10 years together as a group. And in some of these cities, there was 500,000 people. And the only ones that got left behind were the ones that couldn't hold their attention and couldn't remember their piece of the puzzle in the picture. So when they all projected themselves out of this reality into another dimension, they could literally copy paste their whole civilization there and never look back. So this is the kind of shamanism, then there's the Tibetan Buddhism shamanism type stuff. Because I totally put those monks from the caves and stuff up there in, Tibet in this category. I mean, a lot of them can levitate, a lot of them can do things that bypass the structures of this reality. And there's one case in point, and this is like one of my, I hate that this happened to this monk, but it's just like the most incredible story. So this monk had been in a cave. He'd been mummified, for 200 years. He's sitting, in lotus position, and he's fully mummified. And these group of scientists decided to steal his mummified body out of the Tibetan cave. Now, the Tibetan monks know exactly who's in all these caves. Even if they weren't alive when that, Tibetan master went into that cave, there is record. And so periodically they'll send somebody up there, to see where this monk is. Is he alive? Is he still mummified? Did he come back to life? What is he doing? Where is he going? What's he exploring? And it's a pretty typical thing. These monks will learn how to meditate for years and years and years, and their ideas and thoughts, they bypass the structures of this realm, and they can leave for a while. They could leave easily for 200 physical years, and then the body kind of mummifies itself because, there hasn't really been anyone living in it. It hasn't really had any food, and it really hasn't had any water. So the body will kind of mummify itself, but they can end up coming back into the body, and then the body rehydrates itself, and the runners and what are called, the caretakers, there's an actual name for them. They call them attendants. The attendants will come and check up there every so often into the caves and peek in just to see where that, monk is, Did he come back into his body? Do we need to bring him food or water? And then they will go and they will write down, went up there on this date, and he was still in a mummified state. He's still, traveling other dimensions and worlds. We'll check back soon, or spotted that there was rehydration starting to happen with the body. Noticed that, the left foot was starting, to rehydrate itself back into, a non-mummified structure. So he's starting his process back. So the scientists take this body, and this actually was in the news. Part of it was in the news for a really short period. It was kind of like, that's how I found it. I was like, wow, that's just amazing, because that's exactly, how non-physical, we really are. And then you start thinking about all these mummified bodies. Obviously, I don't know, like in Egypt and stuff, what were they up to? Were they creating these bodies so that these people could come in and kind of rehydrate them back into, a real, normal human form, out of a mummified thing? Or were they saving the DNA from the tissues and stuff like that? So maybe a new body could be, formed in a dish that they could, come back into. Who knows? But let me just tell you, what is really going on in this world is so far out there that you couldn't even begin to wrap your head around. So these scientists steal this Tibetan monk, this shaman, basically, and they take him to the mummified body remains to a scientific lab, and then they start to like cut pieces out of it and basically kind of scientifically explore it, but destroying it at the same time. So when the attendant goes up to see if the mummified body is still there, he's like, oh my God, it's gone. And mind you, this is like out in the middle of nowhere, in caves that a lot of them are pretty much hidden. So he must have been a powerful monk in order for, the powers that be to search him out and steal him and make it impossible for him to return back to his body. So the monks like totally freak out, and then they find out that the governments had stolen him, that he's like in the scientific lab, and they're trying to explain to these people that he would have come back to that body because he knew exactly where it was when he was ready. But because now you've like stole it and you've destroyed it, he's stuck. He's totally, completely stuck because he's not dead and he didn't die and he didn't go through, they have in Tibetan Buddhism, they have, I think it's like 30, 60 or 90 days where when the person decides that they're going to leave this world, they go through it and each song takes them through the obstacles so they don't get stuck in the heaven experience. So they don't get stuck in the tractor beam. They don't get, some, programmed experience, and then they don't get held in an electronic prison of their spirit and then forced incarnation back here and forget who and what they were. They have like the whole Tibetan Book of the Dead and all this stuff is about them bypassing that whole system in order to get to the other side so that they can incarnate at will. So anyway, so they steal the body. And so now this person is stuck, traveling dimensions and is never going to get back and didn't actually, wasn't able to be allowed to go through the death experience. And there was this really great monk that came out. There's a video on him, brief video. He came outside of his cave and he was talking about how, he emailed or contacted the Dalai Lama and some of the representatives and said that, he was ready to go on and, he was ready to go through his, rainbow body, experience so that he could go through all that, leave his body, and then they would chant and do all drum and help him so he knew where he was in his experience to bypass the tractor beam, or the light, people call it, of the heaven experience, so he could bypass that. And it takes like 30 or 60 days or something like that for them to get all the way through the obstacle course and to, the other side where they have full consciousness and can come back and forth, into different bodies. Anyway, he sent a letter, and he got a letter back from the head monk saying, no, things are shifting, and we know that you're kind of ready to go, but we need you here still. So, can you commit to another 100 years or whatever? So, I mean, this stuff is like perfectly normal in some places. And there was like another, the tenant is one of my favorite characters. And Carlo Castaneda talks about the tenant. And the tenant is a person that was 10,000 years old that left this world and moved into dimensionals. Not only did the tenant create its own city in which it lives in by itself, but it makes contracts with other people that want to learn certain kinds of shamanism and sorcery. And it's all about generating power, So what happens is that the tenant periodically will come back into this world and ask to be able to utilize some of that shaman's energy in order to stay alive in that physical body, and then be able to teach them some practices. So that's kind of like the exchange. But the tenant, at the point where Carlo Castaneda talks about the tenant can change into a woman, can change into a man, can totally shapeshift. So then you start to get, you think about this world and whatever else is coming in and out of it, types of different things. I mean, and only few of us can get in and out of it, right? At will. Okay. Excuse me. in order to, I stayed away from my practices for quite a while. I got brain cancer really bad. By the time you find out you have brain cancer, it's like stage 4, stage 5. I should have never survived. Should have never survived it. It was that bad. So one of the things is, I did macrobiotic diet. I did all the right stuff on all the different levels. But I still, after 5 years, could not get over the hump of the tumor in my brain. And the only way that I could do that was going back to practices which generate power, getting power back into my body. So what happens is what I see in people, like say people have had a trauma or illness, and this goes back to teachings, that this world is so hard and so brutal that basically as soon as you pop out here and you have a big, nice, luminous field of energy, everything in your reality starts to puncture holes into that field, and then your energy body starts to leak energy. And when I reach in and I touch people's energy bodies, they're like balloons, right, of energy, and they have kind of, the only thing that I can explain, like the texture, it would be close to cellophane, the outside of it, so it can expand and contract, and then just the way that it weaves around and just the flux of it. And just kind of like the feeling. So when I work with people who are really, really sick that say, have cancer and they're dying from cancer, one of the things that happens is that because they've leaked their energy all over the place, and then people have also taken their energy, fed off of them, it gets to where their energy body, like a saran wrap, is starting to seal around them, and it starts to suffocate them. So I never see people dying of cancer or injury or blood loss or any of these things. I see them being suffocated by their energy field because they have no more energy left in their body. And so in some severe cases of people that I work with, in order to help them get well, I have to fill. I call it a fill. So periodically I've got to fill their energy field so that it will stay off their physical body and keep from suffocating them to death. So this is why when people have, brain injuries or they're sick or, different things, they start to get panic attacks. It's because your energy body is literally wrapping around yourself like cellophane and slowly suffocating you to death. So, and this is my experience. This is what I see. This is my training. This is what I've been doing for a long time, in my life. So I see a lot of interesting things. But in order to get really well, you have to have a nice, plump, fat energy body so that your physical body will be nice and plump and fat. And I think this is why, like a mummified mummy in a cave by himself with no outside influence affecting them, and they're not leaking energy, there's been no energy or abuse or anything that's been done to them, that they have such a nice, fluffy energy body that protects even their mummified body, that they can come in and out of it and rehydrate the body to perfect living standard, and then continue on for another, 50 years or whatever. And there's not you can live an indefinite amount of time by generating power. And I really think this is the key. I think that we've been genetically modified by, extraterrestrial races, but by our governments and everything else for a lot of different reasons, good and bad. But I think the main thing is that you will not live very long if you don't have a nice, big, fluffy balloon energy field around your body. And because of everything that's happened to you, one puncture after another, and those punctures never get filled, and it just leaks out all the energy, and then you die. So when so there's 3 types of power. There is power that, I'm going to call it power instead of energy, because you would pay your power bill, right? I mean, I guess you could call it your energy bill, but it's more power because you have to generate power for health. Okay, so 3 types of power. The power you're born with. So, people aren't really born to really conscious parents. And they're not always born to people who also have a nice fluffy energy field. And so you're starting off with a very limited supply of energy, and probably your energy field isn't that great either. And then you're being fed the wrong food, your parents are screaming and yelling, you're around a lot of electronic devices, you're put through school and being programmed, you're injected with vaccines. All these things are puncturing holes in your field starting off. There's been studies done that said that people now are left hemisphere lateralized, which is reptilian disease. The brainwave pattern of that is acid and disease at age 4. And in the 80s, it wasn't until like the early 80s, people wouldn't be left brain lateralized, especially in countries like the UK and America, who specialize in left brain lateralization through programming and, all the things that they do, which makes us reptilian, always about us, controlling, manipulating, and all those kinds of characteristics, which are disease characteristics. And so it would be like early 80s, people weren't fully left brain lateralized until age of 20. So you can see how, you get them right out of the womb and you start puncturing their fields right away. And they're not going to live very long. They're going to be able to be a slave through, while their physical bodies are in their younger states, and then, they're going to drop off and die. Okay, so you don't get very much power from, the person that you're born with, unless, maybe you have a mother who goes and lives off the grid, who doesn't deal with society very much, who's growing her own food and eating that food and living in a complete different manner. But the chemtrails are still going to create punctures. So there's like a limited thing. We need to really like clean up this planet and get back. But so you're not born with very much power. And then that's all the power that you kind of have. And then what happens is as it leaks out, we're not taught to recover that power. We're not taught to recover that power or to replenish it. So the other two things are what you can recover, what kind of your own personal energy and power that you can recover, and then also how do you generate power in the now. And those are the two things that will give you, longevity and, if not, help you live long physical life. So, just some mainstream stuff about generating power and generating energy in your energy field. And these are mainstreamy things, right? Yoga could be really good as long as you're not, doing it for competitive reasons. You're doing it slow and steady with breathing, holding your attention, strengthening your body. You can clean off a lot of energy on your body and in your field. And through the breathing, especially work with the sun in the morning, the sun salutation, you can actually recharge. The sun is one of the largest power generators in our reality. So a lot of shamans and native people that I've known, they have practices that deal with the sun and the ability to help cleanse them of negative energies and then recharge them, right? Do recharging. So generating power in the now, you could do things like, for example, Tai Chi, Qigong, some traditional martial arts that, do no harm, that, you're fully aware and you're fully conscious in, and you're holding your attention through the duration. I know a lot of people who've had MS, been diagnosed with MS and decided not to take the drugs. And one of the things that they find that works really well for them, that keeps them symptom free, is Tai Chi, doing traditional Tai Chi practices in the morning and the night. So that goes to show you right there that through doing the Tai Chi in the morning and the night, that they're generating enough power that the disease is not taking them over. Now, they may never get over the hump into complete wellness, but at least they're holding it at bay. They're generating power in the now that's keeping the disease, it's keeping their energy field filled enough. Okay, so then there is the energy recovering. There aren't a lot of ways to recover energy other than dealing, with what has happened in your past. And I hate this whole forgiveness thing because it doesn't really play into it. Just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean that you got your power back from the event or the situation. And it doesn't mean that they got their power and their power that they lost over the event either, right? Because sometimes we trespass on others and sometimes others trespass on us. And so sometimes we have to release the power we took from somebody else, from trespassing on them, back to their energy field, because that's where it belongs. It doesn't belong to us, it belongs to them. And we took it, like lying to somebody, stealing from somebody, yelling, mismanaging our behavior in conjunction with their energy field, and causing harm. So the other part is recovering our energy field, our power from other people that has been taken or stolen. And so I'm going to talk about something that's pretty controversial, and working with people with shamanism, and a lot of people have, especially women and men, they have serious issues about what I'm going to say. So let's just don't make it into a good thing and don't make it into a bad thing, and just, take it in as information to be contemplated. So one of the things that I had to do in order to finally heal the brain tumor, on top of everything else I was doing after 5 years, because I couldn't get, physical, I couldn't get physical things to impact it all the way, because you know what? I was suffocating in my energy field, right? I was a stage 4, stage 5 brain cancer. I had blackouts. I had, intense pressure with the tumor on my brain. It was in my pituitary. I would spend 3 or 4 days just laying by the toilet and vomiting. I'd have vertigo so bad I couldn't even stand up. I'd have to walk down the wall. I very rarely slept in my bed because most of the time I would get hit by these really bad migraines that, literally I couldn't be in light, and I couldn't be around sound. And I still have some issues. I can't get on airplanes. I can't get in elevators. I can't get on anything that moves. It's really hard for me to be a passenger in a car. I can't go into a movie theater because of all the sound and light. So there are still some things that, have an effect on me, even though I have no brain cancer, and I'm structurally and sound, and my energy field is probably better than it's ever been my entire life. So in order to really push and get over my brain tumor, I had to do something that was called recapitulation. But I had to specifically, as a woman, I had to target a certain area of my life, which was my sexual history. And so it took me about 6 years I had to write down kind of an order and remember every type of sexual offense that kind of was ever come at me. Even, like Uncle Bob, who, it gets drunk at Christmas and slaps you in the ass when you're 12 years old, and everybody in the whole house kind of overlooks it. Well, that's just how Uncle Bob is, right? But that's a trespass, and it's a puncture into the energy field. So within the first year of starting to recapitulate a lot of this stuff, my tumor started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And by the time I finished recapitulating my sexual history over 2 years, then I could start recapitulating some other energy stuff that I had. So it took about 6 years. And then the tumor was completely gone, along in conjunction with my stuff. But one of the things that I learned from one of my male teachers was that women in this world, we have to choose. We have to choose to have a male partner and have sex and feed that person because that's what we end up doing in this reality, is that, we're a plug-in, just like an electrical plug-in. And men actually draw energy from us. And, even from one time having sex with a man, he can actually harvest our energy through this lifetime and the next. So that means that we're always going to have something that's like feeding off of us. And if we want to manifest our reality, we need that power for something else instead of feeding somebody else and then they have a great life, and that they make money and they get through college and they do all these things because we're the ones that are generating the power for them. So in order for me to get well and get over my brain cancer, I had to recapitulate all of my sexual history and reclaim that power that these people were thriving off of. And I think it's really interesting that one of the system's control features is women should be celibate and men can sleep with whoever they want. Well, the more men that sleep with women, the more power that they're harvesting. And then they get to continue to harvest, which can keep them healthier. It gives them more energy to work on things, gives them more energy for success. And then women, because we're kept more clean and we have less sexual partners, I'm not saying all of us, but that makes us a really good, beneficial place to harvest energy. And I remember there was a story, gosh, I can't remember. I think it was like, when one of the guys, I forget what the name is, I can't think about it, but they, were outlining the territories back in the old days. And one of the leaders or the chief of the tribe had his wife go sleep with him because he felt that this white man had a lot of power and he wanted that power back. And by his wife sleeping with the guy, she could harness, that power and bring it back to her husband in order. So there's like all kinds of weird stuff that goes on. So just to take that as information about, like, if you're struggling, especially if you're a woman and you're struggling, kind of make a decision about if you're having health problems, maybe recapitulate your, history to recover your energy field. And I did have, during one of my recapitulation encounters, somebody I hadn't seen for a really long time. And it turned out that they were physically ill and they actually died 3 months after this. But in the energy field, I went to him and said, look, I'm taking my energy back. And he said to me, in the energy field, please don't do that because I'm going to die. And I said, that's not my problem. You've had all these years to feed off my energy field. And now I need it because I have brain cancer and I need to heal. I still have a life. I still have a journey that I want to have. And really, if we were sound spiritually, he would have given me that energy back a long time before I had to go in and retract it. So he ended up dying like a couple months after that. Actually, I heard that he had passed. So I didn't feel bad about it because, I had cancer. I had other issues. Like, there were a lot of things going on with me, a lot of health problems and other things that I needed my energy and power for. It wasn't his power. It was my power. So when you do recapitulation, you only take that which is yours. You never take back anything that belongs to anybody else. And if you feel that you have taken something from somebody else, you can use recapitulation in reverse to give it back to that person in their energy field. So we get around that whole forgiveness thing or anything else, and we return the power back to the people who it belongs to. We reclaim our power, and then that's the end of it. So there are different people that have a lot of, different recapitulation techniques. One of my living heroes is Lujan Matus. He has a lot of books, and I think he does have some recapitulation stuff on Parallel Perception YouTube channel. He's amazing. Nagual shaman. He's been trafficking the dreaming worlds for a long time. Had amazing teachers teach him. He's a very powerful being, funny, loving. In the past, I was lucky enough to interview him twice before he ever let anybody ever interview him. He was also in a video called The Cosmic Giggle. It's not as good as some of his books and stuff like that. So I highly recommend his work in order to start the journey with recovering and generating your power in order to help you heal. And like I said, if you get it right, you don't really know how many more years you're going to be able to add on. I just know that people live on average 40 to 50 years less because their energy field is completely drained dry, and then they die. So we should be living a lot, but we're not taught about energy or power and how it all works and how it's in conjunction. So when you start gaining enough power and your energy field is really plump and solid, you're not going to be punctured as much. So it goes back to a lot of this gang stalking stuff. I don't have to put up protection. I don't do protection because the moment I put in protection or I put protection around me, it's like sending a light beam, laser beam up in the sky. Every dark thing is going to be attracted to it, right? They're like, oh, look over there. Let's go over there. And then you've got every dark thing surrounding you. So the best thing to do is not do protection, but to work on plumping up your energy field and getting it so things bounce off, healing the tears and holes in it, getting the energy back into it. So even if you get paranoid, even if you get distressed, even if things are coming at you in the 3D world or, interdimensionally or multidimensionally or extraterrestrial, it'll bounce off of you a little bit easier versus battling it and losing more power, right? You want it to you want your field to be more of a bounce off deflector than absorber, or allow punctures in it so that you can be liquidated of all your battery energy field and die. Your biosuit will die. But I believe that with the right practices, people could live indefinitely. And one of my major goals in life is to figure out how to be like Twin Dreams, how to, and some of these other characters, and be able to pass in and out with my physical body indefinitely into a world that I create, off this one, maybe an off branch. And then I can come back in and kind of teach people, how to make the turn in this physical 3D world. And does it take a lot of work? Hell yeah. My life has been all about shamanism. My life has been all about the whole life of spiritual practice, all of them, from the ground, the food growing in the ground, to my relationship to the ground, to the water, to all the animals, and then into the extraterrestrial, the multidimensional, the interdimensional, whatever you want to call it. And it's a lot of work, it's a lot of work, but I think that's just the choice that I've made. It's the experience, because to me, that's what matters. Having health, being able to participate, being in full attention to experience nature. When I leave this planet, that will be the number one thing I remember. All the beautiful flowers, the trees, the mountains, rain, storms, the smell of rain on the desert, blooming desert flowers that bloom maybe every 125 years. Those will be the things that I will take from here and that I will remember in wherever I go. And I want to be at full attention, for wherever the course of my life is going to take me, so I can continue to get pollen on my face and continue to smell flowers and continue to interact with the birds and continue to interact with microbes and things that people don't really pay attention to anymore, that they walk right by, that they don't notice because they're too busy in a text, because they're taking things personally, because they're in a text battle with somebody who's puncturing holes in their energy field, and they're puncturing holes in their energy field. And it's a psychic war being used over, the internet to harm each other. So I hope that this was insightful and maybe brought some information to people. And I know that I can sometimes my energy's like a wrecking ball, and I can't help that. It's always going to be that way. But I hope that maybe it was inspiring or helpful, or whatever way people choose to take that. And so I'm just going to start closing with, you're listening to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. And I'm your host, Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff, and Jannie is out until next week again. And we have some great guests coming on in the future. And you can find us, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. If you look in the Studio A category, you'll be able to find us at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where the bee and flower picture is. You can click on that and you can look at the bio and information about our show. You can also, while you're there, fund the Revolution Radio, do the funding click and give us some funds and help us keep us on the air. All of the hosts and the network and the station. And then, if you want to contact me for a session or shamanism session to figure out where you're at, if it relates to business or personal or your land or whatever else that you may be experiencing. And yes, I come from a long line of exorcists, so kind of have a history of dealing with dark things, which sometimes can be helpful when people don't really understand them or they're new. But you can contact me for a session at consciousnessofeconomics at Gmail, consciousnessofeconomics at gmail.com. And or if you want to help to keep our work going, Jannie and I, you can also help us at PayPal at consciousnessofeconomics at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I think we're in for the last minute here. Woohoo! Anyway, thanks for listening. We truly are trying to do the best we can with the radio show, and sometimes there isn't always enough time to get all the topics done and out, but we really appreciate you listening. Thanks so much. Have a great Saturday. Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Will you fight? No! We will run! And we will live!
Shame on you. This could be the greatest night of our lives. But you're gonna let it be the worst.
And I guarantee a week won't go by in your life you won't regret walking out, letting them get the best of you.
Well, I'm not going home.
We've got too far!
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I'm not saying it's gonna be easy.
You're gonna work harder than you ever worked before.
But that's fine, we'll just get tougher with it.
If a person grits his teeth and shows real determination,
failure is not an option.
That's how winning is done. Believe me when I say
we can break this army here.
And win just one for the Gipper.
But I say to you, what every warrior has known since the beginning of time,
you've got to get mad.
I mean plumb mad dog mean.
If you would be free men, then you must
fight to fulfill that promise. Let us
cut out their living guts 1 inch at a time.
And they will know what we can do.
Let no man forget how menacing we are. We are lions.
You're like a big bear, man.
This is your time.
Seize the day.
Never surrender. Victory or death.
That's the Chicago.
Who's with me?
Clap! Clap! Don't let team die! Clap!
All right, let's fly! And gentlemen in England, now abed shall know my name is the Lord. But I tell our enemies that they may take our lives
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. One world coming together to bring freedom home. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor,